We now go to Maury Black.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Where once the UK played a major role in essentially exporting homophobia around the world, over the last decade, I'm glad to say that we've actually had a relatively positive story to tell. I mean, the previous speakers have eloquently spoken of the progress that we have made, but this Pride Month, I think it's important for us to take a snapshot of what it is currently like to be LGBTQ in the UK. As we've already heard, there's evidence that we are more likely to self-harm, more likely to feel suicidal, more likely to have negative experiences in accessing healthcare, more likely to be the victim of a crime, and less likely to feel safe enough to report it to the police. So we know that there is no shortage of areas where we still have work to do. But if you are a trans person, you are even more likely to experience everything I've just listed and worse. And that's because over the last 5 years, there has been an organised and concerted international campaign against the trans community. And the UK is no exception. Where 40 years ago, the media, the religious right and the institutional powers would spread fear and distrust about homosexuals, today we're witnessing the same tactics being recycled and deployed against the trans community. And we know this because the ICR published a study just this year looking at the evolution of extremism in the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And it found that, and I quote, transphobia has long been one of the most major and ubiquitous narratives around which the far right mobilises, and that transphobia should be recognised as a security concern. We also know it because the Southern Poverty Law Centre in the US noted as far back as 2017 that an annual right-wing fundamentalist event called the Values Voter Summit, where transphobia was openly discussed as a tactic to be deployed because rallying against homosexuals wasn't as effective as it once was. In 2017, one of the far-right panellists said, and I quote, "Trans and gender identity are a tough sell, so focus on gender identity to divide and conquer." Trans activists need the gay rights movement to help legitimise them. If we separate the T from the alphabet soup, we'll have more success. Now, isn't it interesting that it was around this same time that we seen a swathe of online Twitter accounts seek to establish themselves in the UK and purport to speak for LGB people against trans rights, especially when studies consecutively show that LGB people overwhelmingly support the trans community. Now, this panellist went on to identify a range of potential allies outside of the fundamentalist right who could potentially and be most effectively drawn in. Now, this list is women, sexual assault survivors, ethnic minorities who value modesty, economically challenged children, and children with anxiety disorders. So as with all far-right recruitment tactics, a minority has been targeted and hatred and distrust are stoked against them by preying upon people's fears. In this instance, by projecting a manipulative and false narrative that there is a conflict between trans rights and women's rights, when the truth is we are battling the same problems and the same patriarchal beast. Trans people are just as likely, if not more likely, to experience poverty, crime, and sexual violence. So looking at the UK, we can see what was advised at this right-wing event playing out. We see self-prescribed organisations and blogs that have already been mentioned projecting things which are factually and scientifically incorrect. We see trauma and poverty being treated as a recruitment tool. We see attacks against women organisations and rape support crisis centres for daring to be trans inclusive. But worse yet, we see a media in this country that continually platforms and projects these hateful, disproportionate views uncritically. Now, I've always been clear that in order to progress, you have to give people the space to educate themselves and to ask the ignorant questions without fear of repercussion. Otherwise, nobody moves forward. But this has to be done respectfully and on the terms of those who are affected most. And that is not what's happening with the trans community. And that alone speaks volumes. I mean, more personally, my office and I have been left in a position for years now where our workload has been increased not just by world events, but not just my own distressed LGBT constituents getting in touch with me, but people from all across the UK who have contacted me because they're too frightened to contact their own MPs. These are constituents of Tory MPs, Labour MPs, and I'm ashamed to say SNP MPs. And I have ran out of excuses to give them because there are numerous parliamentary inquiries and reports which make clear the expert legal and medical advice and explain clearly what the lived experience and reality is for trans people. And it's there for anybody who wants to educate themselves on the matter. So be of no doubt, we are currently living within a moral panic right now, and it's being fanned by organised disinformation and online radicalisation. And if we, as legislators, capitulate to it, then all we do is send an international message that disinformation works. Now, my final remarks are to trans and queer people directly. This is an ugly and shameful time for all of us, but that shame is not yours to feel or yours to carry. In the same way that we teach young people about gay history now, and they're horrified when they hear of our past treatment, so too will future children when they find out how trans people were treated today. This will pass. And in the meantime, know that there are allies everywhere that are with you and are fighting for you publicly and behind the scenes. And like our community is so often having to tell people, we are going absolutely nowhere.